say, roughly guessing, towards the middle of the year, we'll start looking at this new, what I want to do with vehicles.
Okay.
And then towards the end of the year, assuming that we've done really great, we've sold millions of copies, we've got a 360 port in the works, that kind of stuff, that's when we get super ambitious. And that's when we can turn around and say, you know what, let's do something like Eve. Let's have this base building, instancing, all this kinds of crazy stuff. And that's when we've, it's really pushed itself.
Wow. Do you ever feel like you're going to be done with this?
I did in December. I just wanted to get it done. But I think it'll always be part of what I want to do. But, you end up with a love and a hate kind of things with it. It can get really frustrating on the progress and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not hugely big into zombies. I just see zombies as a mechanism to study people. I've said it before, it's more palatable for people to look at a zombie disaster in a game than if you said, well, let's base it on peak oil or the fiscal collapse after the euro dies or something like that.
Yep.
See?
Yep. It's funny how much there's a sense of, apocalypse in our own world right now, and we don't even see them as such. And then maybe decades down the road we will. Like the Depression of the 1930s.
Yeah, well, talking with my brother, because we've always talked a lot about diseases and the effect it has, and that's his job. Like, he's New Zealand's influenza expert. So we talk a lot about that stuff, and I guess part of that is where kind of DayZ came from. So I'm kind of hoping that when DayZ actually comes out, a lot of the elements in it will teach people how fragile things can be, how disease gets spread, and how to control disease. So I actually think it could be interesting to see whether people gain an awareness of what happens in a natural disaster on the basis of DayZ.
Something that I think people in the 21st century have no real knowledge of, controlling diseases and sort of the violence of how quickly they can spread. That's something that I think has been lost in the last 100 years with, wiping out basically so many different highly contagious diseases.
Yeah.
It'll be neat to reintroduce that fear into people that was just so real up until less than 100 years ago.
Yeah, and if anybody does any reading on cholera is a very serious illness, very serious disease problem that happens after natural disasters. And cholera is going to be a real concern for people in DayZ, particularly outbreak of cholera. It could cause some very severe problems. It kills within hours in a serious state. And you need a lot of water. And getting clean water is going to be problematic in DayZ. If you're not controlling, I can see clans trying to control areas around the pond to keep the water source safe and things like that. And it's just, there's so many dynamics that are going to pop out of this system. And all of this is possible because the inventory system, and I can't really emphasize this enough, the ground up, the way objects interact. So previously, any scripter will know who's dealt with dealt with Armour before. Objects that are on you don't really exist. They're just strings. That's not the case anymore. These objects actually exist. They're effectively a vehicle. So your gun is effectively a vehicle. It exists, it's persistent, and it's all the attributes attached to it are persistent. So that's really just a fundamental change. All these people who say, why didn't you use Armour 3? Why didn't you use Armour 2? I hope all those questions are categorically answered now. This is a new engine. It's not Armour 2. It's not Armour 3. It's not Take On Helicopters. DayZ.
All right. Well, I think that I don't think it can be more clear than that with the DayZ dev Tumblr post that you made today, and now getting to hear it from your own mouth. I think that really helps clear a lot of things up.
I think so, but and a lot of people as well talk about the anti-hacking thing. The single biggest difference between DayZ standalone and the mod is that in the mod, the way Armour 2 works is it sends all updates to everyone, and individual clients can control their world. In DayZ standalone, you only receive updates for objects that are near you, and the server decides everything. So unless you hack the server, the impact of whatever hacking or any of that is limited. Now, that
Right.
doesn't mean that people can't hack it, but it does vastly change, just fundamentally change what effect hacks have.
Oh, I think everybody's excited to hear that because I know that as much as everybody loves the game, the only thing that's made people grow wary at all is the hacking. Like once the sort of cheats and the I guess the more sleazy ways of playing have been removed, then there's no reason to ever stop playing. Um,
It's a hard one to talk about because most people will assume that you're saying, okay, well, hacking's gone. It's not gone. I don't think you're ever going to remove that. And part of me says, I don't know whether you want to remove that entirely, like to stop people doing that. Because in a sense, DayZ the mod was kind of a hack. And you want people to be creative stuff, but I think it's going to drastically remove the impact of the hacking. That's
right.
the key.
Well, what about the Alt F4ing? Is that also going to be rectified in the new engine?
Yeah, well, essentially the whole architecture of the basis of how the mod works has changed as well. I was going to put all this in the Tumblr update, but it would have ended up being like, a gazillion lines long. So previously the way DayZ worked was you have your client, your game, and it's connected to a game server that's run by someone or whatever. That game server connects to a database. That's problematic for security purposes and a bunch of other reasons and things like that. It's very difficult for the mod to realize when a player is exited. Now we have complete control. So when the application knows it's closing, it can force saves and things like that. The way the architecture works now is you have your client, you have your game server. The game server talks to a central server. Then that central server talks to a database.
Okay.
So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying, yeah, look, it's really easy to deal with Alt F4s now. We can do a lot of this stuff because, again, the server controls everything. You don't log out until the server logs you out.
Perfect.
So if you just disconnect, your dude's just going to be hanging around there until the server decides to clean it up.
That's great. that solves all of our problems.
Someone raised very well on the Reddit post that why was I talking about volumetric clouds when I'm talking about the server architecture stuff? It doesn't matter how often I explain this stuff, people will notice the graphics and the visuals.
Right.
So I guess I kind of focused on those in the update because it's the first time I could give it. But those who understand the impact of what I'm talking about here, they'll know just how fundamental these changes are.
All right. Wow. Well, I think that's definitely going to make a big difference to a lot of people. It's never a satisfying feeling when you engage in combat with someone and you see them sort of poof away. Not only does it ruin the sense of immersion, but it also obviously makes the player very frustrated. So it's really cool to hear that that's going to be basically a thing of the past.
Yeah, but what this does mean, this server-client architecture thing, that is why we don't know when we're going to be released, because this is taking effectively a game that operates in one particular way and turning it into an MMO. That's actually what is being done. And the guy that's doing that is Andra Spaniel, our lead programmer. Here's the guy that wrote Operation Flashpoint. So it's him and his brother set up BIS with the other programmers who were on the DayZ team. So these guys are legends. And they're working on the code to do all this. So tidying up the net code. I guess I'm geeking out hardcore here at the moment. But
you are.
The way Arma 2 works is all of the clients calculate their own simulation for objects. So let's say I fire my gun. That means that all the clients are notified that I fired my gun, and they may figure out what result that will have. And then they kind of compare notes, and they compare notes on the server. And it's usually, but not always, the client who that object is local to that decides the outcome. It effectively means there's no real umpire. Everybody kind of figures things out on their own, and then they try and resolve it. So there's a lot of fluff in that net code around. With DayZ standalone, very simple. Server decides.
That's awesome. God, that cuts out so much BS you know.
It does, but that's why we're waiting.
Yeah.
We're waiting for that.
Right.
Now, as part of that, we were doing so well with things, that's when I turned around and said, you know what, I really think we need to tidy up the zombies before we do anything else. So that's being worked on at the moment by another program as well. Zombie pathfinding, how they attack, those kinds of things.
God, that's so cool. Actually, it's funny, the second you mentioned Operation Flashpoint, Chris did a little geek moment of his own and went over to his game cupboard and pulled it out and was like, I have the Game of the Year edition. Oh, you nerds. I don't know if you've heard about another sort of post-apocalyptic game that's going to be coming out strictly for PlayStation, actually, and I'm not a console gamer, but I'm really excited about this game. It's called The Last of Us. Have you heard of it at all?
Yeah, we have. Actually, we looked at it, and there's a couple of things that Last of Us does. We've noticed they actually don't bother with transition for their animations. And a lot of people describe armor as clunky.
Right.
Now, how does Zero Punctuation put it very well? It's like, how do they say it, Matt? It's like lumbering around with a washing machine strapped to your back.
Strapped to your back,
like
yeah.
That. Or words to that effect. And I think that, there's some truth to that. A lot of it is because armor is very thoughtful about transitioning you between whatever animation state you're in.
Right.
We've trimmed that a lot. And my rule has been, I don't mind if your character jumps into something if it makes the game more playable. Now, our animators haven't had to really do that much or at all, but I'm prepared. I think it's much more important that your character is responsive to your keyboard than it is that the animation is necessarily perfectly transitioned. And that's something Last of Us does that I really like.
Actually, so I was thinking about The Last of Us, and I was thinking it would be kind of neat to see what I think I've seen in one of those long playthroughs that they showed at E3 or something to that effect. And it was the sort of takedowns that you could do to subdue an enemy instead of just killing them. And I'm wondering, is there going to be anything like that? Would you love to see something like that in DayZ at some point, where maybe you mouse wheel down on a crouching enemy to break their neck, or maybe you just choke them and make them pass out? Something to do with that.
Well, again, I'm going to go completely tangentially here and say that's something that me and Matt both love about Space Station 13. Anyone who hasn't played it, look, if you look at Space Station 13, it looks terrible, but the gameplay of it is fantastic. We have a server, actually. We have a rocket server. What's it called? Should be Rocket Station. Well, I used to run a gaming group called USEX, so at the moment it's called USEX server. But Space Station 13 is free, and we're pulling a lot of design ideas from it. You can actually choose how you want to engage people. You can gouge someone's eyes out with a screwdriver. You can kill them with viruses, stuff like that. So there's a tremendous variety there, but at the end of the day, DayZ has to focus on its simplistic side of it.
Right.
Get this stuff working. So I guess I want to downplay the expectation for that first standalone that comes out. For example, the first time that you guys are going to be able to play it with a very limited group of a couple of hundred people who we're going to use to help capacity test.
Okay.
You'll basically have one, maybe 2 or 3 weapons. That's it.
All right.
Maybe one of each weapon. So we're really drastically restricting stuff so that then when we want to change something, we don't have to change a billion weapons and do massive content updates.
Okay, I see. And you're speaking specifically of the closed testing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Wow, that's really cool. About the character customization, that wasn't something necessarily that I was as excited of as I was excited for what you spoke about with clothing customization, or just with the special aspects that you're putting on clothing. But with character customization, is there going to be just default models like we see in Arma, and just adding more faces to choose from, or will there be actual face editing?
At the moment, it's going to stay pretty simple. So
okay.
You'll see the screenshot of the 3 races that you can be, white, black, Asian. And we want to do more and more faces, we'd like to have it that players could actually upload their own textures for the faces.